I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the Warren County Board of Supervisors. Tonight our agenda is very specific. It's primarily a public hearing on the budget, proposed budget, within a discussion to follow afterwards regarding the budget and whether or not we're going to approve this budget. So the first thing we want to do is do a roll call. And so, Kim, if you'd go ahead and do a roll call for the board.
McIntyre?
Here.
Peter?
Here.
Snell?
Here. Okay, the first item on our agenda tonight is to have a presentation of the budget as it's been crafted and developed so far. So I'm going to ask Megan Batani to present that this evening. She is the budget director for Warren County.
All right. Hello. Before I get started on the presentation, there are sign-up sheets here at the front of the room. If you want to speak for the public hearing, you can go ahead and fill out your information on a sign-up sheet right up here at the front table. Okay, so like Mark said, I'm Megan. I'm the budget director for Warren County. And tonight we're going to go over the fiscal year 25 budget that starts on July 1, 2024. Maybe. Okay, there we go. Okay, so just a brief overview of what I'm going to go over tonight. If you've been at any of my presentations so far, some of this will look familiar, but we're going to go over the 2023 assessments because those affect the fiscal year 25 taxes. House File 718, we'll do a levy review, go over some budget history, and then review the final budget. Just a couple key terms that I'll use throughout this presentation. FY stands for fiscal year, so the county's budget goes from July 1 to June 30th, and that's based on the fiscal year. Lost, those are the local option sales taxes. And then HF 718 is House File 718, and I'll go into a little bit further detail how that affects the budget. So starting with the 2023 assessments, first, if we look at a breakdown of how the valuations are spread out through our county, residential properties make up about 82% of our taxable valuations within the county. So based off of that, if we look at the rollback for the residential property, rollback is based on the state of Iowa limits taxable value growth to 3%, but that's across the state. It's not per residence, per county. It's the whole state is limited to 3%, and then they use that to calculate the rollback. So this year the rollback is 46.3428% for residential properties. What that means is that when you get your assessed value, you're taxed on about 46% of that value. This current fiscal year that we're in, the rollback was 54.6501%. So because of the rollback going down, meaning you're taxed on a smaller percentage of the value of your home, the assessed valuations increased about 26%, but the actual taxable valuations increased about 9%. You can see that in the chart here. You can see that you see a pretty big increase this year for the assessed values, but the taxable values down here go up at a more steady rate. So then looking at House File 718, this was legislation that was imposed for this fiscal year, and it limits the maximum rural and general basic tax levies. And it actually requires, because of the growth in Warren County, for those tax levies to decrease, and it will require those to keep going down for the next few years. It expires in fiscal year 29. And you can see here already this year we got about $300,000 less in taxes than we normally would based on our levies for our normal years based on the old maximums. But you can see that those numbers for our general basic just get bigger as the years go on, and then when it goes to zero, that's when the HF 718 is no longer in effect. And then on the right, you can see the similar chart for the rural basic levies. So going over our levy review, for the current fiscal year 24, what we're in right now, Warren County just makes up a portion of your overall property taxes. For the current fiscal year, that averages about 25% for rural levies and then about 19% of urban levies. The rest of property taxes are paid to other things like schools, cities, townships, districts, etc. So if you look up here, this shows you the countywide levies as shown in this budget. The urban overall levy is 5.98053, and then the rural levy is 8.77206. And this chart will show you what all makes up those levies. So just to look at a history of what the levies have been over the past 10 years, you can see there's a sharp decrease here in the rural basic levy, and that was caused when the lost funds were put into place. Otherwise, the levies have stayed fairly stable. You can see here at the end, we've got actually a decrease in our general basic and a decrease in the rural basic because of that House File 718. When we look at our urban levy compared to 10 years ago, it's increased about 4.56%. And then when we look at the total rural levy, it's decreased about 6%. And again, a lot of that is due to the local option sales tax funds. So looking back at a bit of our actual budget history, what this shows is just the top 10 departments with the highest expenses in the county and what their expenses do year to year. So county engineer is the one you'll see the most variance in. That's because their projects vary each year. Sheriff, you'll see they started to go up a little bit higher in the past couple of years with the jail, the Justice Center being put into place. Otherwise, you can see the other budgets here increase at a pretty steady small rate each year. And then looking at those history by fund, so you can see the general basic did do quite an increase right here in expenses, but you can see that's matched by a pretty large increase in revenues budgeted for this year as well. And again, looking overall, the funds, the expenses increase at a pretty steady rate as well as the revenues. So that was the budgeted history, and then this shows you what the actual historical expenses were. So this budget amount, you can see our current budget that we're in right now is represented by this bar on each, as well as the budget we're discussing tonight. And then this year are the actual expenses and revenues that were spent in prior fiscal years. So again, a fairly steady increase, and then a fairly steady increase in revenues when we're looking at general basic. Secondary roads, again, that's primarily the engineer, and that one varies a little bit more year by year. So if we're looking at the actual net effect on fund balances, we can see that fund balances, generally, we try to have not too much of a decrease on the fund balances while also balancing without having too much of an increase. Debt service here, you can see, stays pretty steady. And obviously, every year, we budget our expenses a little higher to make sure we don't ever go over, and we want to be conservative on our revenues to make sure we don't have too large of an impact on our fund balance that's not sustainable. So looking at the final budget, I just want to put a note there. The numbers could be off about $2 just from rounding between my spreadsheet and the state forms. So our budgeted expenses, just looking at a big overview of the budget by department, The primary areas of the department would be the sheriff, the engineer, and then non-departmental. Non-departmental makes up like external entity contributions. That's a small part of it. And then budget transfers are any ARPA projects as well as debt payments are all under that non-departmental area. And then you can see the rest of the departments are kind of split into smaller areas of the budget. And then looking at this by fund, so general basic is the primary fund of the county that has the largest chunk of the expenses. This is paid, taxes are paid into this fund by all property, by urban and rural, and it does have the most flexibility. The rest of the funds that you'll see here have more specific purposes that they're used for. So similarly, looking at the budgeted revenues, you'll see that by far the largest chunk is non-departmental, and that's made up primarily of property taxes. About 84% of that area is property taxes, and then followed by the engineer, and that's made up 58% of road use taxes, and then 29% is the transfer that we do from the rural fund into the engineer's budget. And then looking at revenues by fund, general basic is about 62% property taxes, and then looking at secondary roads, that's similar to the last, and then rural basic is made up 53% local option sales tax, and then 36% property taxes. So revenues by source, this is just another way of looking at all the revenues. About 50% of the total revenues in the county are from property taxes. And then the other is from intergovernmental is the next. So that would be funds that we get from the state or grants or things like that. So this is the public notice that would have gone in the paper regarding the budget hearing that we're having tonight. Per the Iowa Code, each year the board shall prepare and adopt a budget, certify taxes, and provide appropriations. So part of that is that this public notice is put in the paper 10 to 20 days prior to tonight, and then the budgets are approved per the state classifications, which is what you can see on this document here. And then the funds are appropriated to each department, which is part of the what the board will approve tonight. So one thing to note with budget is that budget approval does not equal policy approval. So just because the expense has the funds in the budget, it does not necessarily mean that the project in the budget is fully approved at this point. Large changes such as building code enforcement, new positions, projects, wages, anything like that, they require further steps for approval before actually moving forward. So approval is not guaranteed just because it's in the budget. So to go with that, I know one of the things that we'll be discussing are the building codes and their effect on the budget. So looking here, the added expense of building codes is $351,600, and the estimated revenues was $895,100. And then this is an overview of all of the funds within the county. So it shows our actual ending fund balances at the end of last fiscal year, our current re-estimated expenses and revenues for our current fiscal year. And then in green, it's showing the budget that we're talking about now. Just to make that a little bit easier to swallow, I've broken it down into the funds that are most affected by property taxes. So our general basic, general supplemental, and debt service funds, they're paid by both urban and rural taxes. Rural basic and rural supplemental are paid by rural only. And then secondary roads fund is not paid directly by property taxes. It's primarily road use taxes, and then a transfer from rural basic, as well as a smaller transfer from general basic, which is laid out per code. When you look below here, these percentages, The goal is to always make sure those are above 25%, to make sure that we have at least 25% of our expenses in our fund balance. So as you can see, we're within that for budgeting for fiscal year '25. We are still within the 25% for fiscal year '26. '27, we're still pretty close, but we are going underneath that 25% minimum in two funds. And then if we look out to what we're projecting for fiscal year '28, just at our current numbers and current estimates, that would put us below where we want to be in 3 out of the 3 of those funds. So what does that mean to us? So our current budget that we have is sustainable for this year and the following year. But moving forward, future boards are going to want to make sure to consider further cutting expenses or services or adding new revenue streams. That will be necessary in order to make sure those fund balances do not go below our 25% threshold. So with that, we'll be getting into the public hearing. All of these slides will be available on the Warren County website, and then there's an area where you go to government, and then there's actually a county budget link in there. You'll see these slides as well as the full budget document.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we are ready to move towards the public hearing. So we need a motion to go into public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open our public hearing.
Second.
Roll call.
McIntyre,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Snell,
Aye. Just to understand what this means, this is our chance as a Board of Supervisors and for you as public that are here to share your thoughts regarding the budget that has been laid out by us tonight. At this point, I would ask that if you are planning to speak, you'd keep your comments as they relate to the budget itself. And I would ask that you also try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. We will have a timer here, depending upon how many people wish to speak. We want to hear everybody and anybody that wants to speak tonight as it relates to the budget itself. I'm not sure how many have signed up. Michaela, do we have a list over here of people who have signed up? We'll go through the order.
3 have signed up.
So we have 3 that have signed up. And what we'll do is when you come up, if you could please state your name, state your address, so we can put it into the record, and then you can talk away. Like I say, it would be nice if you'd keep your comments as they relate to the budget and not try to get off on other subjects tonight, because our goal tonight is to discuss the budget and the budget parameters that are here. Individual policy decisions will continue to be something that we do throughout the year otherwise. An example of that would be if we would want to adopt new ordinances or building codes or enforcement mechanisms. Those things would be at a policy level. Those are not really issues that we're going to be debating tonight. We're really confining our conversations tonight to the budget, which is the financial component. Should those other items be included, that's a discussion we're probably going to have after the conversations that we have with you tonight. So the very first one is Mark Matledge. Mark, would you please come up and share with us your thoughts?
Thank you. My name is Mark Matledge from St. Mary's. I did ask Megan beforehand. I think there should be some basic feedback from you, though, because in the last meeting, in paperwork, we had budgets that were no cuts with the building codes and various different ones. And I asked her before the meeting, so which one is this one? And she said, you guys would be telling us what that was. So
This budget is the one that was discussed at the last gathering quite some time ago. This is referred to at that time as budget number 3,
Okay.
which was the all-inclusive one.
And included the new building code program?
That had money allotted that could be used for that purpose if that was something that would be adopted.
Okay. One thing that I saw was from the April 3rd meeting to this meeting, the inputs that we had at that time, there's really no change in the numbers. There's no change in the numbers. So my first question, what was the percentage of compensation for the main employees that you settled on in this budget? Because in the proposal on April 3rd, it was 15% and then 25% for supervisors. Can you relay that to me and to the crowd as to what that compensation percentage is that's in this budget?
Isn't it at? 50% of the board. Yeah, the commission that has, which is a citizens commission, I believe it was 50%, was that what that's what's included in here. Now, there's not been any decision about that, and there really won't be any decision about that. That's a detail that, it won't go above that, assuming this budget is adopted. Now, if this budget is not adopted or it's amended somehow here tonight, then that would be reduced, of course, and the numbers would change.
What is the absolute bottom line for the 24-25 budget where we'd be in the minus with no changes? Is it the 4.7 million? What is the absolute, you've got a negative of 4.5 million for 24-25, income versus expenses, 4.5 million. So is that is the true number?
Yes.
Okay. I guess the one thing that I've seen, folks, is that it appears when the budget was done last time, you ask the departments for what their plans are. It appears you embrace them fully and then raise the taxes to make it come true. Okay. When we have minuses, I don't know why you're having even a 7.5% increase when COLA's 3.8. Okay. I don't know why you're looking at other programs, again, when you're showing minuses. And then the rural levy, where the rural levy is to make this up, we're asking from Norwalk to Carlisle to Indianola, that's about 70% of the population. And we're asking the 30% of the population of the rural to try to make up that 4.5 million. That doesn't fly and it's not sustainable. I think you guys need to work on this a little bit more. So I think, like I said before, I did ask why we had such, I think we have, I see on here that we've gone, the bottom line, this would be my final point, total ending fund balance, we've gone from 24.7 million, next year 20.5, next year 15.9. I used to coach high school basketball. Those look like losing seasons, okay? I don't know why we're having losing seasons. I don't know why we're not at least maybe to the departments are going, okay, we're short this much. You guys need to come back with a 10% cut, okay? That's what every other budget, that's what every other company does, except ours. Okay, thank you.
Just one thing to note with the fund balances going down, some of that would be ARPA funds as well as capital projects. So some of those are planned fund balance decreases. As we spend the ARPA funds, our overall fund balances go down. As we spend our capital project funds, those fund balances go down, and that's expected.
Okay. The next person is Adam Hill. Again, restate your name and your address, please.
Adam Hill, Indianola.
Adam, can you pull the microphone down to you? Thank you.
No problem, thank you. Megan, thank you for the presentation. Those charts and graphs were really nice to have. So first off, I think the board, thank you for informal policy of 25% of an ending fund balance, as that was validated from the state last year. That's nice to kind of see that policy come into place, that structure here. So I'm on the zoning funding portion. So I was under the understanding, and I know Crystal has been against funding that zoning portion to enact hiring a building inspector, code enforcement officer. I saw a post on Facebook, Mark, that you have come out there. I haven't spoke to you personally, but you came out there to a person and said that you were going to be against. So I will ask on that zoning portion, is that that's not part of this budget? We're not hiring a code enforcement officer, a building officer. We're going to work on policy before we,
We'll have that discussion following your comments.
okay.
So
okay.
you'll be able to hear that
Okay,
conversation.
okay, thank you for that. So I would just say, I would agree, I think more public input needs to be put into place on policy before we start funding things. I think some of these zoning changes could impede and strip away private property rights. I mean, I think there's a possibility with that, so I think policy-wise, we need to structure that. Revenue declining, I know House File 718 is a new thing. It's going to be a thing to work through and figure out, but just an interesting thought, and Megan kind of showed it there, but the past 7 years, we've had zero decline in revenue. It's been 7 years since we've seen a decline in revenue. And actually, fiscal year 17 to 23, we've increased from 23 million to 38 million in revenue. That's 66% increase. 66% increase in 7 years. So we've had a pretty drastic increase in revenue. I think state was going to make some changes where I think we're going to continue to see revenue increasing. Looking at the rural fund, since we're looking at a rural implementation of the rural supplement fund, so I see we're short about 150,000 of a full transfer to secondary roads. Property taxes, property services, roads. Number two, I see public safety is moving from $495,000 last year to 1.6 million this year. That's quite a shift, and I don't want to come out, we got some deputies in here, I don't want to come out and say that we all want public safety, we all want to know we're safe, but that's quite a change there, and for some reason, the money that the towns pay, so you have Milo, Lacona, New Virginia, and I'm going to miss a few, and I'm running short of time, maybe, hopefully you don't cut me off so I can finish a couple points, but those towns pay $110,000 back to the general fund. Well, if the rural fund is going to supply quite this drastic shift, why wouldn't that money come back to the rural fund, make the full circle? Plus, if we took that 110,000 into the rural fund, we could almost fully transfer to secondary roads. That might be a benefit. So that shift of money is actually what you're asking the rural property taxpayers to increase in their taxes, about 1.2 million if I remember right. So we're transferring 1.4 from the ending fund balance and now an increase in sheriff. So I really hope that the rural people will see a better service, and not that we're having a bad service now, but with that drastic of an increase, I hope services change and improve in some manner. I don't know. I think services are pretty good at the moment, especially when that's a county-wide service. That's not just a service to the rural, and now the rural people are going to pay a pretty drastic portion of that bill. So I bring those things up as I just want to end with this as kind of a transparency, because I'll get just a touch off the budget. I know there's some on this board that like to go around and saying that we're in a tough situation because of me and Warren County Farm Bureau. And that needs to stop here and now, because it's not true and it's not being honest. I didn't move that money. That 1.4 million is being moved. We have an increase in taxes. The ending fund balance would have another 1.4 million in it if we weren't moving that money to public safety. That's a decision that was made by this board. It's a budgetary decision made by this board, and it has nothing to do with myself and Warren County Farm Bureau. Last year was a petition signed by the constituents, and it was backed by the state. The state validated that decision, not me and not Warren County Farm Bureau. I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next person is Jacob Gook. Again, if you'd introduce yourself and where you live.
Yeah, I'm Jacob Gook, and I live at 8254 Nevada Street. Thank you guys for having us here tonight, but due to short time constraints, I'll dive right in. So I'm here tonight regarding the Warren County's plans to potentially approve a budget. Obviously, Mark said about the policies, we're not trying to go there, but part of my speech will be in bouncing back and forth between the two. So excuse me if some people don't agree with that. But and I oppose these ideals, and for the reason I'm about to discuss. I want to open the ideology of learned helplessness. For those who don't know, it's when people believe they're unable to change or control a situation, so they don't try when opportunities are presented to them. I don't know anything about construction. I'm quoting somebody in this situation. Government, please save me. Well, this is a double-edged sword because it promotes the reaction of government to save the people, when in reality it gives the government more power and costs the people more money. When people live in rural areas, they often do so for more freedoms and to learn and grow on their own. Improving this will impose them freedoms and people who appreciate them. We don't need to be saved by the government. If you want to, another thing is, if you want to allow an ag exemption, then why not allow an exemption for people who don't want your services for their own home and projects? If you're so confident that the people want this in the budget, then when the budget will allow for it, then why not an exemption for the people who don't want it? Looking at the cost of the permits and additional cost of the inspections, this metric has not been met or provided to the people. How can we support an idea when the details haven't been proven? Why are we contemplating passing this in the budget now? I learned from a young age not to put the cart in front of the horse, and I believe that's what we're doing here. Following up why this is being proposed by the county, these are the reasons I've heard by this so far. People want inspections. For the amount of money being charged for the county to be approved this in the budget, we could hire a third-party inspector at a cheaper cost and they'll stand behind this. Typically, this is the way most home builders do anyway, in counties where it's not provided or not. For safety of firefighters entering a building, typically they're there to mitigate the fire and not go in and save the people due to response time in rural areas. And I say rural because most larger cities in Warren County already have codes already, like Norwalk and Indianola. The majority of fires aren't due to HVAC, and the reason I point that out is because that's the only fire issue gain into this. Electrical is already inspected by the state. 49% of fires actually start in the kitchen, so why aren't we implementing kitchen safety instead? I think we're kind of focusing on the wrong ideals here. Insurance liability, that's my favorite threat. Insurance companies won't insure your home if it wasn't built under a code. So all homes built prior to this won't be insured. I think we can all agree that's pretty erroneous. Dallas County is over twice the population of Warren County, and they're still operating very well and not having issues with building inspections or insurance companies. The insurance company's goals are always to reduce the amount of money they pay out, and they're never interested in giving money away. Occupancy permits, I myself have built a home in the past 5 years, and I know many other people have, and this was not an issue or difficult to overcome. I'll hurry up here.
You're okay. Take your time. Take your time.
So another thing I've heard is people aren't capable, we need to save them from themselves. Well, to me, this is a very scary phrase. And to quote Ronald Reagan, one of my favorite one is, the 9 most scary, terrifying words in English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. If you're worried, afraid, or unsure, talk to people who've hired contractors. If that isn't enough, hire your own inspector. You will get better service and at a cheaper cost. Safety, it's about the safety, they say. Well, no one in Warren County is being deprived of inspections on their homes. If you feel like this is something you want, you're welcome to do so. I ask you, what are we leaving behind for our children? With the rising cost of land, building material, interest rates, soon only the upper class will live in the country. Why do we feel we need to promote this in our country? Is it because people want to look down on blue-collar workers and that they're not trusted? In the United States, there is no government entity for accounting. They are self-governing through the FASB. That's a pretty big deal. The Financial Accounting Standards Board, for those who don't know. So why are we not continuing to implement this with our contractors? Contractors want to continue to do good work in our community because it's our livelihood, and in our county, word gets around very quickly. Inspections are only as good as the quality inspectors. On many jobs I've been on them, and especially government inspectors, it's not due to the details, but the lack of the big scope of the project. The additional costs and revenue numbers I've reviewed lack the detail and don't take into account the current economy, much less the idea that the residents will build in the other 91 counties that these aren't enforced in. The counties that we're comparing ourselves to are Johnson and Lynn County. Johnson County is 158,000 residents, and Lynn County is 229,000 residents. Warren has 56,000 residents. That's 3 to 4 times us. So it leaves you with less than 25,000 residents that this would be impacting if you remove Norwalk and Indianola that already have building codes. So why focusing on that and why now is my question. And the true estimated cost, I will disagree with, at $351,600. It's more likely 3 times that if you operate on a fully functioning staff. You're going to need probably at least 3 inspectors, a code enforcement officer, and a couple people to review all the plans for 200 permits in a year, if we hit that scale. And how do the smaller towns like Milo and Lacona feel about this being forced upon them? It's already been discussed that they won't be able to afford this, and the county will be forced to step in. All of these ideas sound good on paper, but when you add this into our sensitive, detailed budget, unknown economic times, and an election year in the mix, why are we choosing to do this now? What is the rush when we're $2 million in the red? I have stated many times in workshops and meetings that we need to get with the times. Why doesn't the county do the same? People want to hear about the budget. People want to know about these things. People want information delivered directly to them. And this used to be done by newspapers being delivered to our doorsteps. And this method of communication is archaic and has been replaced with information being directly to our electronic devices, like our cell phones. Why are we still sending faxes when email is available to us? I think we can do better. I do want to personally thank Mark and Crystal for fulfilling their job obligations, responding to me and in the public, and I appreciate the conversations and feedback I've had with you too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else that wants to speak? Please state your name and.
Hi, Patty Alexander, and I just keep seeing all the things that you have been doing. I appreciate your work, but all the things that you've been doing has been growing our county government. And as Republicans, we believe in small government and getting out of the way so that people can do their work and their jobs and thrive. And all of the decisions that have been made along the way has been growing government, adding to the communications, adding to this and adding to that. We just want a smaller local government so that we can do and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Is there anybody else that'd like to come up? Please come up, state your name and your address.
My name is Julie Santos. We live in White Oak District. We moved to Warren County from Dallas County, West Des Moines, 2 years ago to 3 years ago, although we have the property before that, because we see the benefits of being rural area that we can do, we can farm, we can raise our animals without restriction or too much restrictions. If we want city restrictions, enforcing code enforcers, whatever that is, we will stay in West Des Moines. We won't come out here to looking for freedom out in Warren County. So we can only speak to my husband and I that we do not want the unnecessary enforcement, We want to have compost piles right in front of our properties. We want to have so. If we don't have time to move, maybe junks considered to other neighbors, we want to have the time to take care of it whenever we have time to. This is the idea of being a freedom. This is what I, immigrant to United States of America from Southeast Asia. And I love these countries, and I like to see these countries going the right way, like it was our founding father. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak? Can you please state your name and your address?
My address, okay. Lauren Gideon, I live at 9498 Legacy Trail. It's actually a new road in the county because me and my family have been building. We've moved here from Polk County this year and have been trying to put down roots here, have a little more room. I have a whole lot of children and we're getting more room to play. And so I apologize. I know this conversation is not going the direction you guys are hoping for right now, but what I know about policy is the best way to prevent bad policies to make sure it's not funded. And so that is a budget topic. And so for that reason, I have two kind of points I want to make. While we have loved working with the people here at the county, what we have realized and what we didn't expect, and I've learned that Warren County does have a reputation for the overhead and the limitations it does on creativity and self-governance and things like this in the country. But it seems like our family and the county has very similar goals. You know, we don't want to live in an unsafe place. We don't want to put our children at risk. There's a lot of things that we have in common, but the obstacles that the county will put in our place to achieve those things actually slows down our process of achieving them. And so I think we have to have a culture of trusting the people of Warren County to do what's best for them. The alternative is not pretty, as you know, and from that, I kind of want to talk. I spent 4 years in the fire service in Ankeny, and I know that's a talking point that you guys have considered. We don't want to send people into dangerous situations. I agree. I lived that. There's a couple of scenarios we didn't know if we're walking into a meth house, okay? So the propensity for explosions, like there's a lot of things that fire service people have to consider. If we are to make sure that every structure a firefighter walks into is safe, to do that, okay, I'm going to throw out some ideas. People might agree or disagree, but some people don't like to walk into a structure that might have a firearm. Is that the level at which we're going to go to make sure people are, quote, safe? There might be violence going on in that home and our law enforcement walks in. To avoid that, should we have cameras in people's homes to make sure they're walking into somewhere safe? We all want safety, but we have to realize that safety comes at a cost. And so freedom does have intrinsic risks that we have to accept. And so for that reason, although my heart is for the firefighters, it's a risk that firefighters take. And I would say firefighters also, too, probably would like privacy and safety. And there's no reason necessarily to fund, again, overhead and invasive measures that good intentions take away those things from Warren County residents. So that is my plea. Thank you.
Good job, thanks. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Again, state your name and your address, please.
Travis DeWitt, 21110 90th Avenue, New Virginia. So during the budget presentation, there was a number of $895,100 of expected revenue. Can I ask what those numbers are based off of? Where that $895,000 is coming off of?
Those numbers are based on the zoning department budget that was submitted to me.
Okay, so I'm guessing those are Lindsay's numbers of 191 projected permits for 2024? Is that where she's getting those numbers?
I'd have to ask Lindsay.
Okay. So if we go off of that 191 projected permits for 2024, basically that comes down to $46.90 per build. Well, $46,000 or $46.90 may not seem like a big number for a $350,000 house. Are those same numbers going to apply to a $20,000 shed? Because that would increase that shed pretty dramatically. You know, that's going back to your bank and talking about things.
Well, again, Travis, the numbers that were used there are proposed numbers that are not adopted or anything like that. So I want to make that really clear, and those policies related to that haven't been fully vetted. So my understanding, though, to try to answer your question, is that those were there's a sliding scale, and it depends upon the type of structure. So I can't get down to the specifics. Those are questions that those that wrote those proposals would need to address.
Yep.
And again, those are just proposals. They are not really, that's policy level stuff that has not been adopted. And I don't, I don't think we're planning to approve those things necessarily tonight.
Yep. So
we're not planning to adopt policy tonight. Let me just put it that way.
So going back to the county wants to hire one zoning administrator or code administrator and one code enforcement officer, right? So one of each?
There were several personnel that were involved in that.
Okay, so if we have one code enforcement officer and he takes a 2-week vacation, is our builders going to have to basically pause for 2 weeks to wait for an inspection?
Those are questions, again, are policy level. They're not really, that's not really part of what we're approving tonight.
Okay. Well, it is because it's part of the budget that you're proposing. But, going back to Jacob, insurance companies, the whole thing about insurance companies not wanting to insure in Warren County, insurance companies aren't wanting to insure anywhere. Hell, State Farm's basically left the state of California. California's inundated with codes, and they don't want to be there. It's clear across the country. Insurance companies are just being insurance companies because of inflation and storms right now. So to use that argument, I just can't see that. But, if we do hire a code inspector, if we bring in somebody that's not licensed, on average, it's about 1.5 years to get them through an inspection process or an inspection training school to get them up to speed and where they need to be. So with that, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak to the budget? Seeing none, I'd like a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the budget hearing.
Second.
Roll call?
McIntyre?
Aye.
Heater?
Aye.
Snell?
Aye. Okay, now we're into the next part of the meeting tonight, which is to approve a fiscal year 24-25 budget. Before we can do that, I think we probably need to have some level of conversation up here and decide whether or not we're ready to move in that direction. First of all, we do have to make a decision by Iowa code, so it's not like we can put this off a long time, but we can adjust this budget that is before us. And so if there are some thoughts regarding this budget that anybody would like to make, I would suggest that this would be the time to do that. So either of you care to make a comment or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Crystal, go ahead, please.
As I have said before, I would like to freeze the electeds' salaries for this year and not have an increase at all.
Any other thoughts? You don't want
And where did like the options come from?
Pardon?
I keep hearing people say option 2. I don't know what that means.
when we had our budget discussion, and Megan was helping us to go through that, she had 3 different scenarios that were presented to us in that discussion.
Okay.
And one, there was budget scenario 1, budget scenario 2, and budget scenario 3. Budget scenario 3 was the one that we collectively agreed to at least bring publicly because it included everything as a possibility. Budget scenario 2 actually did not have the building codes or code enforcement as a component to it. So budget scenario 2 that we had discussed basically had all the budget items that we had gone through all the many months of conversation through, but it did not have the building codes or code enforcement component to it. That was the main difference between budget scenario 2 and budget scenario 3. We have an option here with this if we want, and then Megan actually presented it tonight, with the options if we were to remove the building code components as part of this budget, we could do that.
Yep, let's go ahead and do that.
Anything else?
And I know we brought the sheriff's budget down to an increase of 500,000.
All right.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because he had asked for an increase of $1 million, and I think we all agreed that that was more than we could sustain. Yeah.
And that was pretty much all that I'm at right now,
Okay.
so.
Darren?
Okay. Well, I want to thank Megan for her budget presentation. That's probably one of the best ones that she's given, and she shared a lot of details, and that's everything that we have relative to our budgets, and it encompasses what we've been working on the last 6 months or so. The whole building permit and, building codes, permitting, inspections, that was all kind of, that came up because this year the county was able to do a new land use plan, and we were able to develop new ordinances. And we've been challenged in the past with enforcing our ordinances, with nuanced properties, with kind of a lot of big event planning things going in place. There was a lot of things going on in zoning. And those were issues that everything was coming to the Board of Supervisors because our ordinances were not aligned with our codes. So that's what this big project does. I mean, I want to thank the zoning department for meeting with the consultants, and it's good news what we've done. We've got our ordinances all in place, and they align with our code, so we're good. And we've come a long ways. And the next natural progression is to talk about the enforcement of ordinances. Because right now we can have rules, and I agree with everybody in this. I mean, every speaker made valid points, and I really appreciate the professionalism and the civility of how this meeting is going. I think this is exactly how it's supposed to go. I've learned a lot. I don't think the county's ready for building codes and inspections. I think Mark makes a good point, and Crystal, we need to detail the policies out and effectively be able to communicate operationally how that would go. And I think we'd have to convince Warren County that the goal isn't to impede progress or production. It's not for the government to get in your way. And because you're concerned about that, we absolutely need to step back and make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that we're putting the systems in place that are accommodating our public. We get all that. We were just trying to make our department stronger and have it have more horsepower and have it be able to do more things for all of us, not to you, but for you. And that was the approach that we had. We've heard you. We're not going to push anything to Warren County that you don't want or that you think is a negative thing. If you think it's negative, we're not doing our jobs and presenting to you the benefits and why we think this is important, and we're just not prepared to do that. The reason why this got pushed in is because it was just the next natural thing for us to look at as we were redoing our ordinances, doing our new land use plan. So we've come a long ways in zoning, and we're doing a really good job. And I want to thank zoning. Zoning's not pushing this. We asked our zoning department to come up with a plan. Tell us what the numbers are. Tell us what this looks like. And that's all they were doing here. And this got pushed into the budget, which we would naturally do. If we're going to add something, we would look at that. But by no means are we ready to move on with that. So, and relative to compensating the elected officials, I would say that I don't know, Crystal, if you could get to like a 1/3 increase, which would make a 7.5% increase, more of a 3.25 increase. So I could get there on that, if you could. But other than that, I mean, I think we're all in alignment on everything pretty much. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, I think first of all, I want to thank everybody who's been involved, because it's been many months in the gathering of information. So everything that we've gone through to get to this moment has had countless hours and meetings and engagement by a lot of people, several of you here in this room, in fact, a lot of you in this room, along with us as Board of Supervisors. This budget that we're looking at is not just the Board of Supervisors budget. This is comprised of a lot of people and engagement from a lot of different parts. All parts of the county are involved with this. There have been some, I think, challenging issues that have come before us. And I want to throw out a couple of numbers in particular because I think that these have brought us to where we are today. These are just a couple of examples. One of them is, if you look at the cost of gravel, same quantity, same quality, to put on our roads in Warren County, in a period of 3 years, that cost has gone from $1 million to now projected to be $2 million this next year. Any of you that do hauling and have bought gravel, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those are not made-up numbers. So those are hard and fast realities of inflationary factors that are impacting us right now. So, Mark, as you were asking, there's $1 million right there that over the last 2 years has hit us hard. And that's just keeping the same level of quantity and quality on the roads. Then you have to look at the cost of all of the equipment to keep it running at the same time. Those costs, road graders have gone from, slightly under $300,000 to now over $400,000, approaching $500,000 apiece. Well, when you use road graders, that's part of the ongoing maintenance of the county. So those types of costs have hit us very hard, and they will continue to hit us hard. Third factor that we cannot minimize is the impact of growth. We have a lot of new residents in the county. We have a lot of folks who have chosen, for the very reasons that Mrs. Santos talked about, we're a place to go. We're a place to be. We like living here. My wife and I have lived here 15 years. We came from someplace else. So have a lot of other people. So you look at the last 10 years in particular, what's happened to our population in Warren County? It's gone up almost 25%. So that's a huge number. Everybody wants their piece of heaven out here, which is great. I mean, that's why we're all here. And that's what makes Warren County a wonderful place. I love the spirit that's in Warren County. We like our liberty. I'm one of those. I like my liberty too. And the respect for that liberty must be maintained. And the conversations that people have been willing to have been very, very much appreciated. I've had countless conversations in the last week in particular as we've been talking through the issues of codes and code enforcement and what does this mean and all this sort of stuff. Clearly, we are at a point where we're getting the cart ahead of the horse. And so from that standpoint, we are not anywhere close to being able to go down the road of code and code enforcement road. That being said, though, we have been behind the times at the same token. Why did we start a process nearly a year and a half ago to update our ordinances? The reason we did that was because we had ordinances that were 40 years out of date. They didn't even match the comprehensive plan, land use plan that was put together 20 years ago. So we had direct conflict within our ordinances where we said two different things on the same subject matter, and then you put our zoning folks into a position where they're trying to interpret this, or the boards, the prior boards to this one in particular. We've been the beneficiaries of this process, but the prior boards were having to deal with every single little zoning question that came up. I feel very fortunate that I have not had to deal with the level of zoning issues that either of my colleagues here have had to do in prior years. And I think part of that is a reflection as to the process we've been going through for about 18 months. And that is the process of getting our ordinances so that they're current. We're still 20 years out of date. We are in the final throes of coming to some agreements, I think, on just general ordinances and development here in Warren County, where we're going to have, I think, in probably the next 6 months, some final ordinances proposed from all of us in the room and others that said, yeah, we need to update these things to bring them from 2004 to 2024. And from that side of it, I think that's a very positive move. I think that the next step to go beyond that, where we start dealing with code enforcement and all that sort of stuff, I think that's what's gotten everybody kind of upset. And I can understand why. We don't know what code enforcement means. What is that? Because we don't have those codes in front of us. We don't have those issues and those things that we're all concerned about. They don't exist yet in the way that they would actually come through an enforcement mechanism. We don't even know what the fines would be. We don't know how. Travis, you're exactly right. We don't have those questions answered because we haven't gotten there yet. We're not there. That's the policy side of it, where the policy has now gotten too far outfield. In other words, the budget here, and even though we were trying to take advantage of our circumstance by taking advantage of the ordinance conversation and potentially be efficient with our thoughts and maybe move in the next direction, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I cannot go down the road of supporting the code enforcement at this time, because I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think we're a long ways from that. We have to get ourselves, I think, just up to date with regular development ordinances. The concern that I do have, and we have issues. Unfortunately, not all of our neighbors are good neighbors. There are a few bad actors out there. You all know them. I know them. I can start listing the list off and you say, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Those are all true. So then the question is, what do we do about that? Do we just let that just sit there and continue to be the problem? Or are we going to try to help those folks get their acts together so that they can be good neighbors and friends with everybody else? I think that question is not being answered tonight, because we clearly are not prepared to have that conversation yet, what that really means, because we've not completed the ordinances that really govern development and also the land use plan for what we think protects various properties and uses of property throughout the whole county. There's a general feeling, I think, right now that we want to make sure that we do our part to support ag business, ag development, big part of our economy here, so that those entities are not adversely impacted by development, with everybody wanting to come out and get their piece of heaven and forgetting there's a business activity going on here. It's been going on for generations, and it probably is worthwhile to keep going a little bit longer. So I think that the balance between all of the ordinances that are yet to be developed, that needs to happen first before we would engage in the follow-up conversation, which is what do you do about enforcement of those codes? So that's where I am on this. I would like to propose that we adopt this budget without the code enforcement component of $351,000. And the issue of salaries and those types of things, frankly, there's a time for that, and that time is coming where we actually will discuss that. But tonight, we're just dealing with the overall budget parameters, and we can always spend less. We don't have to spend all of this, but we have to submit something so that everybody out here knows what the maximum is that the exposure is going to be. That's all we're really voting on tonight, is what the maximum exposure would be and how that would be dealt with. And so with that, I would propose, and I'll make it a formal motion here, that the Warren County Board of Supervisors approves the fiscal year 2024-25 county budget less $351,600 in expenses in the zoning budget for building code enforcement. And I would formally move that.
So you're saying you're going to give raises to the electeds then?
Was, Crystal, was that a motion that you made, that it be certain salaries be lower?
No, we were discussing which cuts we wanted as a board. And from what you just said, it sounds like you're okay to spend up I mean, as long as we approve this tonight, it's okay if you two approve that later.
That would be the
That's what I'm hearing.
That would be the maximum. I'm not saying we have to do that yet, because there's still more decisions to be made. The details such as you talked about as far as the salaries specifically, those are not on the agenda tonight. They are a separate issue that has to be voted, and that just frankly follows process and procedure.
Well, all right.
And we can deal with that issue separately.
You've had a lot of problems in the past because you didn't listen to me.
Pardon?
You've had a lot of problems in the past because you didn't listen to me. But you are up for election, so you do what you need to do, Mark.
Was the issue just the
It's not just that, it's a lot of things. And the way he talked to me tonight at the meeting this afternoon, cutting me off 3 times, I'm done, Mark. I'm so done with you.
Just a broad question, so is it's acceptable to, I don't know if you're approving, but to approve a budget that has a deficit?
right?
The way it is now.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it happens. Yep, it's normal here.
It doesn't seem like it should be.
I agree. I mean, that's a whole nother issue. No, it's,
Government normal. Print money.
we don't print money here at Warren County. I can assure you. All right, so I'm willing to make a vote on,
You going to second my motion?
and let me ask, so are the salaries in this budget that you're proposing, or they're a separate item?
They're a separate item that we would need to vote on. I'm not approving the salary numbers in their complete form, because those have to be voted on in a separate resolution, and it can be voted on at another day.
Megan, can you verify that?
So the salaries are budgeted for within this budget, and then there are separate resolutions that are passed for every single employee's wages, including the electeds, after the budget as well. So the amounts are in there in the budget, but there is a separate resolution that's completed as well.
And the amount that's in the budget, that could potentially go down.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
It's over $300,000.
Absolutely. We could freeze them. I mean, that could be the final vote on the salaries, but that would be done separately.
I thought the budget has to be, make decision now or today. I thought that's what I thought I heard.
We're going back to the maximums of the budget that would be allowed. That's all we're doing. We're setting the maximums here that would be appropriated. But the actual amounts that would be spent would not exceed that. They would probably be less.
And they will not make decision today. That's what you're saying, the actual amount. We talk about today is the maximum amount of the budget,
Yes.
but not necessarily a final decision number.
Right, because by code, we have to pass something. And so this would be the maximum that would be considered for appropriation.
When does that happen, the number?
I'm not, so is that, Darren, is that a second on my motion or not? necessarily.
No, I'm going to second the motion. I just want to understand what's in the budget. Is the 7.5% increase in the budget that was presented? Yes. Okay, so the 7.5% is in, and what your Mark is saying is, we're going to approve the budget in general.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll second your motion, Mark.
Okay, roll call, please.
McIntyre,
No.
Peter,
Aye.
Snell,
Aye. The next item that we have to deal with is then the appropriation by department. To follow along, this would again reflect the attachments, which would be, I'll make this motion, that we would, the department appropriation of 100% of the county budget are hereby approved effective July 1, 2024 for FY25 as reflected on the attached, less $351,600 in expenses in the zoning budget for building code enforcement. So this is the departmental appropriation.
Yeah. So do we need?
And that's a motion.
Oh, that is a motion. Okay, I'll second your motion. Thank you.
Roll call.
McIntyre,
No.
Peter,
Aye.
Snell,
Aye. Okay, and stay tuned, folks. There will be more discussions and more opportunities to follow up on things, so please stay with us. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
McIntyre,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Snell.
Aye. Motion's adjourned. Thank you.